Sometimes, whatever it is you're seeking can be right under your nose, but you just don't see it. As if you're not quite in tune with the universe. Once revealed, this thing, a seemingly arbitrary discovery, became an obsession. And now I see it everywhere. I was looking for writers and artists. I was looking for stories. What I found was a dark mythology, an enigmatic legend. What I found was the King in Yellow. The story of the publication evolution of the King in Yellow is also the story of how authors, artists, and even musicians are influenced and inspired by each other. We can zoom out about 200 years and witness the collision between weird fiction, the Gothic romantic, and science fiction, and also the organic maturing of cosmic horror. The origin of the fictional character is not in dispute. It's the ambiguous nature, the relationship between that entity and the human condition, which is more profound and mysterious. A book of short stories collectively called The King in Yellow, written by Robert W. Chambers, was published in 1895. The title refers to the actual character, who in the tradition of cosmic horror writing is left out of the narrative spotlight. This allows the afflicted humans to be the focus of the story. We're left grasping for clues and information about that guy. But more importantly for this book, it's also the name of a fictional play, which, if read fully by anyone, would reveal the unspeakable truths of reality and send them utterly mad. The first story, and in my humble opinion the best, The Repairer of Reputations, is a masterclass in uncanny atmosphere, creeping dread, and unreliable narration. It's extremely rich in themes and future social commentary, but the element that I'm really interested in for this video is the presence of a higher power, an ancient dynasty that will soon restore the imperial crown of America. The lifeblood of this conspiracy is the connection to the greater cosmos, an even higher power that came from the stars, an alien god, if you will. Of course, most of this information is relayed to the reader by someone who has suffered a head injury and read this play that will send you mad while he was recovering. So a pinch of salt may be required. But it's the play that expands the mythos of the Yellow King and overflows into the other short stories. We even get to read some of it. Not all of it, obviously. That would be a bad idea. Along the shore, the cloud waves break. The twin suns sink behind the lake. The shadows lengthen in Carcosa. Strange is the night where black stars rise, and strange moons circle through the skies. But stranger still is lost Carcosa. So Robert Chambers is using this place, this other realm, Carcosa, nestled within a forbidden play, to almost legitimize the ramblings of a madman. It's referred to in several of the short stories in The King in Yellow, and it will eventually become a significantly fleshed out location once more authors get their hands on it. More on that in a minute. But before we move forward in time, we must acknowledge the connective tissue to the past. After all, time is a flat circle. About 10 years before Chambers wrote the stories in The King in Yellow, his tales somehow bound to lost Carcosa, Ambrose Bierce had a story published called An Inhabitant of Carcosa. It's a very weird tale about a man from that city who wakes up in an unfamiliar wilderness and embarks on a personal and philosophical journey. I have read claims that Chambers just borrowed the names Carcosa, Harley, and Hasta, another name for the King in Yellow, because that's what he just happened to be reading at the time. But I think Bierce's influence runs much deeper than mere name copying. An inhabitant of Carcosa does have those cosmic horror themes. It builds a world beyond the scope of human understanding. Also very similar to the works that will be inspired by him, a lot of Bierce's writing has a feeling of discovering something much older, like he was just another conduit to the unfathomable ancient cosmos. Another story in The King in Yellow, The Mask, is a direct homage to Edgar Allan Poe's The Mask of the Red Death. No surprise that his fingerprints are all over anything considered early weird fiction. We're not claiming plagiarism here. This is standing on the shoulders of giants and forging a path. Without Edgar Allan Poe and writers like Ambrose Bierce and Robert Chambers, Lovecraft doesn't manifest in the same way. And the greatest TV show of the 21st century doesn't have that wonderful dark mythos. In early 1927, just after his return to Providence, Rhode Island, right in the thick of producing his most celebrated work, H.P. Lovecraft read The King in Yellow, or so the story goes. After 1927, the influence of Chambers' stories can be seen all over the Lovecraft catalogue. There is more of a commitment to a wider cosmic mythos and the inclusion of the King in Yellow himself. Kind of. However, the concept of pure fear being attributed to something utterly incomprehensible to humanity, or indeed the idea of a forbidden text or knowledge sending somebody completely mad, had been a hallmark of Lovecraft from the very beginning. This is another branch of my cultural osmosis theory. Lovecraft does point to Edgar Allan Poe, Lord Dunsany, and eventually Chambers as the writers that most influenced him. But I think the core idea that would eventually become Lovecraftian was lingering way before and held the properties of folklore, something that's always been lurking in the background. Again, not an accusation of plagiarism. It matters not who created the mythos, especially when it becomes a melting pot of artistic expression, something that Lovecraft was very fond of. The development of the character himself becomes extremely complicated and even more mysterious once Lovecraft and his circle of friends start to reference the king himself and the mysterious cult that materialized around him. In The Whisperer in Darkness, we get the first reference to Hastur, not labelled as the King in Yellow, but it's the same thing. The forbidden play of the same name from Chambers' stories gets incorporated into the Necronomicon, Lovecraft's fictional Book of the Dead, itself a collection of stories and spells and laws that it's rumoured, if you read it, can send you mad. Although Lovecraft claimed that the idea for the Necronomicon came to him in a dream, there is some evidence to show that that dream was the King in Yellow. The offspring swallowed the origin. Time is a flat circle. More references to the Yellow King and to Carcosa are sprinkled around Lovecraft's work from the last 10 years of his life, but that's very little compared to what happened after his death. The Cthulhu mythos, the cosmic horror shared universe, spearheaded by Lovecraft contemporary August Derleth, featured dozens of inexplicable deities. There are great old ones, elder things, extraterrestrial gods that invade our dreams, reside in another dimension, or live at the bottom of the sea. The King in Yellow is probably one of the great old ones. I say probably because even for this mythos, his exact identity and purpose is a little bit foggy. He's referred to as Hastur, Lord of Interstellar Spaces, Zakala Koth, the Unspeakable, He who shall not be named. Oops. Sometimes he's described as a simple man wearing a long, dark yellow cloak. But more often, he's an evil, tentacled monster. There's bat wings and antlers and big sucking things. And oh yeah, I almost forgot. He's also Cthulhu's half-brother. The point is, the King in Yellow is now established as a Lovecraftian entity. But awesomely, he gets to retain that sense of mystery. And let's not overlook Carcosa, which has its lore expanded within the mythos. A place that refuses to be mapped in geography or meaning. The enigma of the King in Yellow and Carcosa are interchangeable. A definitive canon just won't stick, which means, brilliantly, that the legend can exist across all those reference points. Time is a flat circle. And so we arrive in the 21st century, and oddly enough, the time when I'm first properly aware of the King in Yellow, even though we have crossed paths several times over the years. I was doing some research into a video about the history of weird fiction, and there he was. I was looking for similar books to A Voyage to Arcturus, and there he was again. So I read those Chambers short stories, and I absolutely loved them. I dug a bit deeper, and I uncovered the Lovecraft connection. How the hell did I miss that? And then the cosmic algorithm finally caught up and handed me the True Detective, Yellow King, Carcosa Dark Philosophy. Now here's the weird thing. I watched True Detective when it first appeared about 10 years ago. I think it's one of the best TV shows of the last 20 years. I loved it. I devoured it. I paid attention. I assumed that the occult imagery, the ritualistic nature of the murders was just that serial killer cinematic aesthetic, a bit like in David Fincher's Seven. It's not just a murder, it's a fucked up work of art. And as the story expands, there's crazy people worshipping a pagan god that I thought was created just for True Detective. The genius of the show is that it completely holds together if that were the case. I bet 99% of the audience has no idea who the King in Yellow is or what Carcosa and the yellow sign means. The focus of the show is the characters and the story. The most intriguing ties to the King in Yellow are completely overshadowed by the relationship between Marty and Rust, the pessimistic ramblings, and the procedure of actually solving the case. But now I know that the Yellow King has 130 years of history and baggage. So I watched the show again. What I discovered is such a rare thing in storytelling. That original TV show that lived inside my head is still perfect. It's astonishing. But my experience with the King in Yellow and the Lovecraftian aspect takes True Detective to a newer, much higher level. Now I see the complex manipulation of the audience that Robert Chambers achieved in The Repairer of Reputations echoed here. I see double meaning in the actions and predicament of the characters, in particular Rust Cole. He gradually slides towards oblivion as the series progresses, mentally and physically coming undone. I can see your soul at the edge of your eyes. It's corrosive, like acid. You got a demon, little man, and I don't like your face. This is all accounted for. Rust was an undercover narcotics detective for far longer than recommended. He's an extremely troubled man who has seen too much human carnage. His life is now one big trippy hangover. But apply the lore of the play, The King in Yellow. If you read the whole thing, you go mad. As Russ is exposed to more and more of the case, remember, he doesn't sleep, he dreams. He becomes more erratic. More visions appear on the screen. And then there's the bigger picture of what the Yellow King actually wants. He has a cult doing his bidding, or at least killing in his name. Carcosa is again presented as an abstract idea. It's a place that exists outside of space and time. It's a state of mind occupied by the mad, or it's the Yellow King himself. All fun theories and extensions to the cosmic horror universe that was hiding in plain sight in modern-day Louisiana. Let me leave you with this sobering thought. In the universe of True Detective, people are aware of Carcosa and the Yellow King. We've already established that this mythos exists across time, genre, and authors, from Ambrose Bierce to today. The detectives never connect the actual collection of short stories, the book itself, or any of Lovecraft's work to the murders, because the Yellow King is not fictional in the True Detective universe. This means that the slide into madness, the yellow signs, the corruption of the mind, even the swirly tunnel into another dimension is not metaphor or traumatic stress alone. True Detective is part of the King in Yellow story.